Yo, what's up, survivors? Welcome back to Games Unhinged. I'm Anthony, and I'm here with Michael. And in honor of the Games Unhinged 1 year anniversary, today we have a very special guest with us, Richard Keene, the lead programmer from Sandsweb Studios. How's it going, Richard?
It's going really well. How are you guys doing?
Good. All right, so first off, what do you do?
What do I do? Well, I am the technical lead programmer on the Dead Linger. I probably programmed about 90% or more of the game, and I just sort of run the whole show here on the technical side.
So what is the Deadlinger?
The Dead Linger is a zombie survival sandbox game, and that's, I guess, the best way to describe it right there. It's also an infinite world, which is one of the parts I really like about it. You can kind of go and go and go in it, and I think that's what it is.
All right. How long has the game been in development, or when did the idea originate?
Well, the Dead Linger has been brewing for a long time. Jeff, who's the CEO of the company and runs the whole other half of the company, basically, he sort of had this idea of a zombie game for a long time. And we've looked at other zombie games and seen where they just go for more and more gore and such. And we're like, no, we want a zombie game which is more like kind of the Romero style movies and such. And so it was his vision for many, many years of this game. And then starting about a year and a half ago, we began to really concretely look at it. We got done doing the game Detour, which was our first game that we published, and started thinking, well, now's probably the time to do this zombie game. And so we began to plan out how to do it. Lots of people told us you can't do an infinite world, and we did it anyways. So we planned it all out and have just begun programming it and doing it and have forged ahead on it.
Nice.
Where do you see or hope to see the TDL 1 year from now?
Well, a year from now, we expect the world to be a lot more detailed and have a lot more things to do in it. One of the issues with making an infinite world is you have to page it as people go through it. You have to create the content ahead of them, all that kind of thing. And so there's not the luxury that other games have of planning out a scene in advance and just shipping it with the game. We have to build the scene on the fly as the player
Yeah.
moves through the world. And so that's quite a challenge. And we spent most of our time on that challenge. At the same time, we have a list of, I think it's 130 things that people could do in our game. You know, whether it's hunting or signaling each other with mirrors from a long distance away, blink a mirror at somebody so they can find you, cars, maps, whatever else it is we think ought to go in the game, maybe electricity, things like that. All of those other features we have on this long list, and a year from now, we expect that most of those will be there. And so a year from now, the game will be far more detailed around the player and have much, much more to do than it currently does.
How many people are currently working on the game?
TDL has a staff. I mean, the Samsung Studios has a staff of about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, about 15 people that are currently working on the Dead Linger. We've got the coders, which is me and Thomas and Tom. We have two Toms that are coders. That's interesting to keep apart. And then you have sort of the management side with Jeff and Dana and David on QA. And then we have the art side with Dane, Harry, Atley, Jay, Jeff, and Parker, which are doing all the 3D modeling and weapons and everything in the game like that. And we have two audio guys, Jonathan and Brandon, that do the beautiful music, which is in the game. And also all those sound effects, zombie moans. They stand around and moan all day, I think. But that's pretty much our staff, and it's a very small staff for what we're doing. But what we are doing is also procedural, and so once you get the procedures right, then the size of the game beyond that is not really a big deal. You have to get the algorithms correct, though.
And as I understand, you guys have a new staff member, correct?
Yeah, David is our QA test overlord. He is. We've actually got an official person who tracks bugs and tests everything and makes sure you can reproduce them. And it's gotten the load off of Jeff and I quite a bit, where we had to be going through forums and filtering out which bugs were kind of real versus other problems that people would have with their machines and such. And he's doing all of that. It's been really nice to have him on board with us.
So what did you do before the Deadlinger and Detour?
Well, I started programming when I was 12, and I'm now 55, so I'm definitely the old guy of the computer gaming world. I remember programming on punch cards in Fortran, and so I've been doing a lot of things before TDL. But more recently, I've worked on personal inertial navigation, which is where we put a little thing about the size of a cigarette pack on a fireman's belt. And then using the motion of their body as they move, we were tracking them through a building. And so when firemen go into a building where there's no GPS, we knew where they were, what floor they were on, which end of the building, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and that was all using very fancy physics math and inventing the algorithms for that. So I've worked on that. I've also worked on large corporate databases like medical records databases and hospital databases. And so that's actually come in quite handy on the dead linger, because one way of looking at the dead linger is simply a massive database of world attributes. So we say there's a building here 300 miles away at this location. That's in a database, which keeps track of that and has to hand it off to the clients at the right time when they get close to it and need to be able to see that building.
What is the biggest technical challenge of the dead linger?
Okay, the biggest technical challenge in the dead linger is that we don't do pre-canned scenarios or scenes. Most games, like if you go into Halo, for example, they have built a level or a scene, and you typically go through like an elevator, doors, airlock, or a zigzag passageway or something between scenes. And while you're doing that, they're loading the scene in, and the scene has been pre-processed, a month or two before, right, at the company to get it as efficient as possible for rendering. So they get very high frame rates, and people expect that. In the dead linger, we don't have that luxury. Instead, we have to create the world. We have to dent the terrain down. We have to texture everything. We have to place all the objects in the world and in the buildings and put the buildings in an orderly rows down streets and all those things. And we have to somehow do it all in about a 60th of a second. And obviously you can't do that. It's impossible to compute that fast. Our ground, for example, is a combination of what's called Perlin noise and Voronoi areas. If you look those up on Google, on Wikipedia, you'll find them. But we do a combination of those two, and the compute on that is about a half a second on modern processors. So what we have to do is we have to throw it in a background thread. We have to build all that and then hand it back into the graphics engine and still try not to stutter the frame rate too much doing that. And so there's this huge challenge of keeping the world fluid while at the same time we're doing just incredible amounts of computation to create that world as you move. And that's actually been the biggest challenge of all. In the whole game. And we're gradually getting there. This last week or so, I've been working very intensely on revision 10H, which will player fixes. And also, it's got a heck of a lot less stuttering going on. The game is much smoother than it was. So
I feel like since the newest build came out, there's like no more crashes at all. I'm not having any problems with that.
Yeah, we made a very hard decision. You talk about hard decisions you have to make in a company. 4 or 5 months ago, we looked at the dead linger, and we'd done it all in C++, and it was on top of the Ogre 3D graphics engine, which is an open source free engine. And when we started a year and a half ago, we thought, yeah, that's a really good choice and all. But as we got along, by about revision 9 of the dead linger, we were saying, this engine just isn't cutting it. And not that there's anything wrong with Ogre. I'm not criticizing Ogre. It's just that we were in C++. There's issues with crashes and memory problems in C++ and such that you can get. And we looked at our velocity of development, how long it took us to get a new feature in. And so we have 131 features we want to get in. If each one takes 2 or 3 weeks because of having to deal with all the finickiness of C++, then it's going to be years and years and years before we get those features in. So we looked around and said, Unity is very popular and it's very fast to develop. So I took a week off basically and just played with Unity for a week and messed with it. I did some experimental infinite world type coding in it to see if it could page fast enough and things. And it looked really good. So we bit the bullet and said, we're basically going to stop. We're going to throw out the entire source code base, except as reference, of course, and recode this whole thing from scratch in Unity. And that's what I've been doing for the last 3.5 months. And we finally got that out here. That's what revision 10 is. And it's been a huge improvement. We don't crash anymore in the sense of just flat out crashing like we used to. And our development speed is much, much faster. In fact, we had a humorous thing happen a little bit back. The first camera, they were on the same render plane as the rest of the scene. So if you walked up to a wall, your arms would stick through the wall and they would disappear into the wall. And Jeff was like, no, that's got to be, on its own plane. And literally within 5 minutes, I had them in their own camera on their own plane in front of everything. And so now they don't punch through walls. And when I did that exact same thing in C++ and having to deal with a lower level engine and all that, that one thing took me several days to do because I had to mess around with how do you get the engine to render on the right plane and all these kind of things. And in Unity, I just flicked a few checkboxes and added an extra camera and stuck it on the same spot on the player, and away it went. So that's why we switched the engine, and it's already paid off. We're already moving so much faster now on new features. And unfortunately, I cannot tell you what the next huge feature is going to be because that's kind of for marketing and Jeff to deal with. Yeah, I know. Well, anyways, but it's going to be coming along, and that thing will be programmed in probably a tenth the time that it would have taken on the old engine.
So what are the biggest difficulties right now with multiplayer, not including the hands morphing into weapons?
Oh, okay. So multiplayer is an interesting thing in any game, not just the Deadlinger. If you were to take two PCs and put up one of the popular games like, let's see, Battlefield maybe or something, and if you put them up on two PCs on maybe a kind of a slow network connection and you played the game with two people side by side seeing each other's screens, you'd find out there's a lot of lag in those games that the player is not aware of. Because usually you don't do that. Usually you only see what's on your screen and nothing else. And so there's this whole challenge in multiplayer to keep that experience as apparently instantaneous as possible between multiple players. And so we have that challenge that goes on in our game, that you have to have the low delays, you've got to move the data quickly and all that. So in fact, I did a custom serialization and packet sending in our game over the connection that Unity has, because Unity's automatic synchronization code is designed for a single scene world, which we are not. And so I had to do my own code there. Anyway, so this whole thing of synchronizing, but beyond that, because all the players are not in the same scene necessarily, like they could be 500 kilometers apart, right? And so they're in completely different physics worlds and different scenes from each other, and yet the server has to manage all of them pretty seamlessly. And that's been a huge challenge, what I call a distributed world that they're moving around in. And that is something, in fact, I'm debugging today quite a bit. We've got it pretty well working, but what our solution has been on that is that a cluster of players that are close together will maybe be all simulating on the server with physics and all that kind of thing. But another group of players 500 kilometers away will be simulating everything on one of the client PCs. So we actually shift pieces of the world, the burden of simulating pieces of the world around between the clients as the world is being simulated, and yet the server keeps the authoritative database on where everything actually is, and it saves to disk and all that kind of stuff. That's been very challenging. Yeah, that's one of the things people told us we couldn't do. We've done it, so that's nice. We like one of the sayings here that we really liked in our company is those who say it can't be done should get out of the way of the people that are doing it. And we're just doing this. All those years I've worked on distributed algorithms and genetic algorithms and simulations and things are finally paying off here in the Deadlinger.
All right. What can we look forward to for Build 11?
Well, I can't talk about that. I'm just going to punt.
You can't.
I'll get in trouble if I talk about Build 11 at all. Interestingly, though, Build 10H, which is about to come out, is going to be much, much smoother and better than the old thing. Oh, yesterday I rewrote the farm crop code. We had this thing where every corn stalk in the game was a single model that we dumped into the world. We created it as an individual world object, and that was really laggy and slow and caused a huge stutter in the frame rate when we did that. And yesterday I rewrote that over to use the tree system that they have in Unity, and so all the corn stalks are now treated as tree objects with their very fast rendering code, and so that's all become really, really smooth now, which is a good one. But that kind of thing you'll see coming. But as far as Build 11 goes, can't talk about it. Sorry.
All right. So your son is the CEO. What is that like?
Usually it's the other way around. The dad is the boss and the son is an SOB, the son of boss. And the dad runs the show. But in this case, Jeff has got this really great talent for working with people and finding people. Somehow he's found this amazing team that we have that just sort of gets the job done. And it's let me just focus on the fun part, which is programming and getting these algorithms right and stuff and doing all the algorithm work in the Deadlinger. So it can be a little odd though, where I've got my son telling me what to do. My wife doesn't like that too much sometimes. That why is he the boss and you are not? But it's actually in practice it has worked out really, really well, and it's been very, very successful. What we have done. He's began doing this when he was about 15 or 16. And then I pushed him ahead, and basically he's getting a MBA degree from the School of Hard Knocks here. Instead of him going to college and stuff, he's publishing a computer game. So
Nice.
he's learning the hard way how to do things, and he's getting really good at it, which is nice. And this is our second game now also. Um,
Yeah, so you have
so,
some experience.
yeah, he's done some good resume building in the last few years.
And you have family working on the game?
Jeff is my son, and he's the CEO of the company. Also, Thomas Keene is also my son. He's Jeff's older brother. He's a programmer. He did all of the network distribution code, which was in Rev 09 for distributing over the internet and stuff. And he also did some of the other code in the original The Dead Linger. But he is now at college doing some other things and kind of his own career path and stuff. So he's only partly working on our team still. So actually, we got 2 sons working here.
So there's 3 of us. Or a
3
few.
of us, yes. Of us, yeah.
All right. What is your favorite weapon in the TDL?
Oh, well, everyone likes the katana, but in fact, I think the Vegas rifle is just the coolest weapon.
Yeah.
In fact, we're about to do probably today or tomorrow, probably more like tomorrow, I'm going to really be trying to get the headshot stuff on the Vegas rifle to be more intuitive. So it really looks like you're hitting the head exactly when you hit the head and all that kind of thing.
Nice.
And right now it's kind of fairly primitive what we're doing for that. But yeah, the Vegas rifle I just love. You get up on top of Swart's store and you start zooming in and just sniping. That's great. And it helps that I have the cheat code, so I can just get infinite ammo and a few other things for debugging, of course, only for debugging purposes. Well, when we ship, we disable all the cheat codes. Are not even possible to use in the shipping version of the game.
What do you do for recreation besides building the game?
Well, I have a dog, and the dog and I, and often Jeff or one of my other kids, will go on a hike up in the mountains here. We actually live right up against the mountains next to a ski resort here. And so right out my backyard, about 100 feet is the beginning of a mountain trail in the Rocky Mountains, and we just go for wonderful hikes, throw sticks for the dog, all that kind of thing. That's kind of the short-term thing. And yesterday I went to a BYU football game, which we won, by the way. Go Cougars.
We saw that on Twitter.
Yes, yeah, and so I do football games occasionally with my wife. What else do we do? Lately I've been working so hard I don't really do much for recreation, but I love to read books. I play cello. What else? Hiking, and that's about what we do around here, I guess. It pretty much covers it all. And, of course, computer games. I love playing League of Legends. I am SND Thunderfist on League of Legends. If anyone wants to join games with me, I would love to get out of Bronze 5. I'm at the absolute bottom. It's interesting. I just saw one of these videos on TED or something, one of the TED Talks, about the wiring of the brain by computer games and the effect that computer games have psychologically on people. And basically, your entire generation of young folk, which means anybody under 40, by the way, but maybe even under 30, all these young people, your brains are wired differently for computer games than mine is. Because I grew up running around the backyard with sticks playing Army, and you guys instead play Battlefield or something on a computer screen. But, bang, bang, I got you, and then we'd argue for half an hour over whether you got them or not. But it wires the brain differently, and so you guys can actually track simultaneously moving objects and multitask way better than guys my age can. And I think it's a disadvantage in League of Legends, because I'm at the bottom of bronze still. So my son says that's a bunch of baloney. I'm just bad at it, but that's different.
All right. What has been the most triumphant moment for Sandsweb Studios?
Oh, well, there's been a couple. One is when Kickstarter shot through the roof on us. We originally, very naively, tried to get $60,000 funding on Kickstarter and got about 2.5 times that. And it's a darn good thing we did, because we far underestimated what it would take. But that was triumphant when that showed that the vision we have and the idea we're doing was really, really good. The next big moment was when we released the C++ game and people actually bought it. It was like, wow, we're actually making some money here. We can actually put food on the table. And that was a really big deal because it proved that, yes, you can do a distributed infinite world. The thing that everyone said we couldn't do, we had actually achieved, not very well, but we had achieved it at least well enough that people liked to play it and run around the game. And you remember what that part was like. And then the next big one, I think, was Greenlight here. We got greenlit by Steam, and that got us onto Steam, which has been a much better financial move in our case, and has really solidified the company quite nicely and all. So that's been really cool. And just getting the whole rewrite done here in only 3 months was quite a challenge. There was one other triumphant moment a long time ago in the ancient history of days here, when we first released Detour. That was a really big deal. I constantly get kids telling me they want to be computer game designers, and of course my answer is, how many games have you ever actually built, and published? And when we got Detour out, even though it was not the greatest game and all, but it was a great idea, Detour ended up being quite a triumph in that it put our name on the map and was really the first big game. And that happened when Jeff was about 18 also. So you got an 18-year-old who's published a computer game, which is pretty darn cool.
All right. What would you say would be like the worst moment Sandswap Studios has ever like experienced?
One of them is that we completely wrote Detour for the Xbox, and we were all ready to release on the Xbox, had it running. It was really cool that you could play it on an Xbox 360 on our HD TV and everything else. And then Microsoft marketing said, we've changed our mind. Bam. Wow. And we were suddenly like, oh crap, here we're doing this game. Fortunately, I had a day job, and a few things, but we just scrambled after that to get it out on the PC. And now you got a game which was designed for the Xbox but is on a PC, which is never quite as good as far as the control smoothness and integration, menus and all that are different. And that was a really bad moment in the company, I have to admit. And then there's been a few financial times when we've just run out of money, and somehow we're just like, well, I guess I'll just keep working anyways. And I have a little sign on the wall of my office here that says, good things come to those who wait. And then the word wait is crossed out, and it says, work their asses off and don't quit. And it's just what we did, even though we had no money, and we actually had to depend a little bit on pizza donations, as we call them, where people would send us $10 for pizza. We've just ground through anyhow, and finally we've come out the other end of that on Steam here, and it's really quite wonderful.
Nice. What kind of options would you guys like to give server admins or machinima directors such as ourselves?
Yeah, that has been hotly debated because we have a game experience and vision of what playing TDL should be like, and as soon as you introduce machinima, you completely break that. You basically say, here's all the cheat codes, we're going to leave them all enabled, and you can use them to do machinima. Nonetheless, we think machinima is really important, and I especially do, and Jeff and I have argued this back and forth quite a bit, but machinima is a very important feature to have in a game, and so we've actually planned a bunch of those. What we're thinking is you would tag a server as a machinima server, and then it would show up on the server list as a special kind of server, so people would know they're going into a totally broken game, basically. And also, of course, you wouldn't get achievements and things like that under the machinima mode. And then you'd be able to turn zombies on and off, directly control them, maybe even play the game as a zombie so that you could animate the zombie into the right motion that you want. Things like that. There's all those kind of features, but those are not the top priority for the game right now. Many other features we want to get in first. But the whole machinima thing is very important, and the whole fan base doing that, is such a big thing.
Is there any advice that you have for aspiring programmers?
Oh, okay. I get this all the time. People go, oh, you make computer games. And so you get the typical, the classic kid. I ran into one of these last week, in fact, is a kid in high school, senior in high school. He's like, I want to be a computer game designer. And you start talking to him, and there's two kinds of people you run into in that case. The usual ones is the first thing I ask them is, how many games have you designed and built? And they're like, oh, I love playing Halo, or I love playing Battlefield. I'm like, no, that's nothing to do with designing a computer game. Okay. Yes, you have to have played games, and it's good to be a game fan. But my advice to anybody who wants to be a computer game designer is don't wait. Just right now, today, while you're hearing me talk, okay, while you're listening to this talk here on Games Unhinged, go to your screen and start downloading Unity 3D right now. And I'm not saying that because I like Unity. There's other engines out there too, but Unity just happens to be kind of the leader right now. Go get Unity and start building a game right now today. Don't wait to go to college. Don't wait for anything. Just do it. And so occasionally I run into the young kids that have done that. For example, we have a little 10-year-old kid here in Park City where we live who's just this absolute little genius kid, okay? And he came to me and he wasn't asking questions like, gee, I want to design computer games. This is fun. He was asking specific C++ questions and questions on how to program. So this kid is out there programming stuff now. And that's the kind of kid that 5 years from now is going to be an absolute genius programmer building the next great game. And so if you want to be a game designer, don't tell me you want to be a game designer. You should have such a burning desire. You're already designing games despite anything else, and you're building them. Designing a game in your head is worthless. What you have to do is build it actually in some fashion.
After the Deadlinger, what do you plan to do? Possibly a new game?
Yeah, we have a list of games. This kind of sounds like the Pixar story, but they had a whole list of films way back. But we have a list of games we want to build, and some of them are my vision, and some of them are Jeff's vision, and other things that we've thought of doing. And we're going to begin working on those once the Deadlinger is well along and on its way and has become the major game that it really ought to be, and really the leading game. And once we get past that, then we'll be working on some of these other ones. I would love to do a game which uses evolution as the upgrade strategy in a StarCraft-like game. Yeah. And so instead of having a tech tree where you upgrade your armor to level 1, 2, and 3, instead you crossbreed your units, and they evolve the right armor at many, many different levels and things. That's something that's my little pet project I'd like to do, and Jeff has several projects that he's thinking of and visions of things he'd like to do.
Sounds cool. All right, Richard, thanks for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you.
Okay, guys. Hey, I hear that you're coming up on the season 2 of the real TDL. Is that right? Was the 11 release maybe? Yeah. That I'm looking forward to. I love watching your little videos where you run around and do things in the game that I never designed. I love it when somebody does something in the Deadlinger that we never thought of. That's like, wow, you could actually do that. What do you know? So yeah, your little videos are fun. We like them.
Thank you. All right. Oh, and congrats on the Deadlinger making it on Steam. Just wanted to put that out there.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like and share this video. Follow us on all of our social networks. And if you haven't already, make sure you go purchase the Deadlinger now on Steam. Once again, thanks for watching. Peace.